Racist manager kicks. Black boy. Out of the hotel. Instantly regrets it when his mother arrives. The surname you carry can sometimes open doors and sometimes slam the world shut in your face. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. In a bright classroom with oak-paneled walls and perfectly aligned desks at Wellington Crest Academy, where annual tuition reaches $68,000. The only black boy in the literature class sat upright in the front row. His name was Otis Carter, 12 years old. In a world of students bearing names like Vanderbrook, Ashcroft, or Delaney, names tied to banks, media empires, and global financial firms, Carter sounded like a typo on an elite society application form. Otis wasn't loud, nor did he stand out the way pampered children often did. He was quiet, always dressed in a neatly ironed white shirt, and carried an old leather backpack, not designer, but clean and well-kept. Every morning, Otis arrived on the school's shuttle, while his classmates were dropped off by private drivers in Rolls-Royce Ghosts or Tesla Model X. Yet Otis's silence wasn't an invisible void. It was armor, a carefully honed readiness for the moments he knew he would be scrutinized. In literature class that day, Mrs. Aldrich, a British-born woman with silver-streaked hair and a voice soft as silk, posed a question about metaphor in To Kill a Mockingbird. The room fell silent. No one wanted to touch such a heavy topic, a book about justice, racial prejudice, and the courage to stand against bias. Otis raised his hand. His voice was steady and clear. The metaphor here is not just about the innocence of children being wounded by the adult world. It's also a warning about how society imposes prejudice based on race and class. Mrs. Aldrich nodded, momentarily taken aback by a response more insightful than many she'd heard from college students she'd once taught. But not everyone in class was impressed by Otis's intellect. At the back of the room, Callista Whitmore, with glossy blonde hair, a diamond-studded headband, and her legs crossed under a Gucci teen collection dress, let out a snide laugh. She leaned back in her chair, raised her hand in a mocking "wow" gesture, and said loudly, "I didn't know the help gets to audit our classes now." The classroom fell into a hush, like the air had been sucked out. There were a few stifled chuckles from the back, more out of flattery than humor. The students knew exactly who Callista was. The only daughter of Richard Whitmore, CEO of the five-star hotel chain Whitmore Luxury Holdings, a global empire spanning over 20 countries. That surname, Whitmore, was enough to make any teacher or staff member tread carefully. A single phone call from her father could cost someone their job. Otis said nothing. He stared straight ahead at the board, lips pressed together, eyes unwavering. He had long since learned this lesson. Not every insult deserves a response. Sometimes, silence is strength. But deep in those eyes was the numb familiarity of insult, of being dismissed for no reason other than the color of his skin. That story might have ended right there, like it had 100 times before, if just a few days later, at a luxury resort called Solaria Heights, the world hadn't turned in a way Callista and her family never saw coming. At a place like Wellington Crest, where the honor board bears the names of families donating millions of dollars to the school each year, words weren't just tools for communication. They were weapons. And Callista Whitmore wielded that weapon like a trained sniper. That day's history class was proceeding in near silence as Mr. Harper lectured on the civil rights movement of the 1960s, a subject that could make people uncomfortable in a room where most students were descendants of wealthy white elites. When he brought up Rosa Parks, he asked, "Has anyone here ever felt like they didn't belong just because of how they looked?" The air thickened. No one responded, until Callista spoke up, her voice sweet as syrup, laced with venom underneath. "I bet Otis knows exactly what that feels like." "Right? What neighborhood are you from again? Southview? Oh wait, That's where the gardeners live. There were muffled giggles. Some students exchanged glances. Otis remained still. His pen moved across the page, not taking notes, but continuing a half-finished poem. They call us names that are not our own. They paint our faces with rusted strokes. But in the silence of this red clay ground, we rise like oaks that will not bow. Callista wasn't finished. She closed her Italian leather notebook, leaned across her desk, and raised her voice just enough. Or maybe your mom works for some rich family. Is she a cook, a maid, or a driver? Or wait, maybe you don't even have a dad. That last sentence cut like a blade across an old wound, a mix of arrogance and assumption. No fact needed, just a label tossed like a stone. But Otis didn't respond. He simply lifted his head, his dark eyes still as a lake before a storm. No one saw him cry. No one saw him explode in anger. But they all saw something shift, an eerie calm, like someone who had heard far worse and remained standing. At lunch break, Otis sat alone in the corner of the courtyard, chewing on the sandwich his mother had made, white bread with grilled chicken and peanut butter, when Callista passed by with her group of friends. They laughed loudly, gossiping about their upcoming trip to the Maldives. She tossed her voice over her shoulder, not even glancing at Otis. Heard Solaria Resort just raised their suite prices to $2,800 a night. Guess that means little visitors. Like you can stop dreaming. Otis still said nothing, but what she didn't know was that he was counting every word, every glance, every act of disdain, as if writing a journal of battles. Not to seek revenge, but to remember. Some people, born clutching diamonds, remain heartbreakingly poor in compassion. That kind of poverty, of the soul, was something Otis had heard his mother, Vanessa Carter, speak of. Don't let them define you by the way they look at you. They'll try to make you feel like you don't belong, but they're wrong. The truth doesn't need permission to exist. And then came the moment no one in the class could have predicted, the weekend getaway. Everyone at school knew Callista and her family would be at Solaria Heights, the most elite resort in the state, where even the towels had monogrammed initials sewn in silver thread. As for Otis, he'd be there too, but not as a boy lost in a world of luxury. On Saturday morning, the sky was crystal clear above the southern coast, and sunlight streamed through the expansive glass panes of Solaria Heights Resort, the crown jewel in the Whitmore Group's luxury hotel chain. This was the kind of place where every door opened with VIP fingerprint access, where the hallway carpets were replaced weekly with Swiss imported sheep wool, and where a single French breakfast cost $160, wine not included. Otis Carter stepped out of a silver-gray luxury sedan from the premium limousine service. The 12-year-old boy, dressed in a dark blue polo shirt and neatly pressed khaki trousers, carried himself with a poise far beyond his age. In his hand was a leather folder containing a booking confirmation for the Royal Penthouse Suite. The top floor, private pool, a 130-square-meter living room at $2,800 per night. The reservation was under the name of his mother, Vanessa Carter. Otis approached the front desk. Monica, a young, gracious, and ever meticulous receptionist, greeted him with a gentle smile and a flicker of surprise at seeing someone so young, yet composed and courteous. She checked the system. The booking was indeed confirmed, even with a detailed note. Special guest, early check-in authorized, full-service priority. Master Otis Carter is permitted to check in on behalf of the guest. As Monica prepared the room key, the sharp sound of angry footsteps echoed from behind. Callista Whitmore, in an ivory Chanel dress, her hair tied high, sunglasses veiling half her face, strode up to the counter like a storm. Barely 10 minutes earlier, She'd been in the ground-floor restaurant fuming over an unsatisfactory croissant. But one glimpse of Otis standing at the reception desk sent her blood boiling. "What is this?" Her voice rang out, crisp and sharp as glass on stone. "What is he doing here? This area is for guests, not kitchen staff." Otis turned around, unfazed. His face was calm, his deep, dark eyes fixed steadily on Callista's furious gaze. Monica stood awkwardly between them. "He's checking in, Miss Whitmore," Monica replied, trying to maintain her composure. "The booking confirmation clearly states—" "Stop!" Callista cut her off. "If you check him in, you might as well start packing. My father will have you fired in less than an hour." By now, a few nearby guests had taken notice. A middle-aged couple paused over their cappuccinos. A bellhop quietly took cover behind a faux plant. The name Whitmore carried weight here, like a royal decree, and Callista knew it better than anyone. Otis didn't move. He spoke softly but firmly. "I didn't come to cause trouble. My mother booked the room, and I'm just doing what she asked me to do." "Oh, your mother?" Callista laughed. "What does she do? Laundry supervisor? Nanny? At Solaria, only people with real power get to the top floor." "Got it?" Monica glanced back at the screen. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The words, "Carter Legacy Holdings," appeared next to Vanessa Carter's name. Not just a VIP guest, this was the largest stakeholder in the Whitmore hotel chain. But Monica didn't get the chance to say it aloud, because Callista had already turned and shouted, "Call security." Now, just minutes later, Richard Whitmore, the resort's general manager and Callista's father, arrived with hurried steps. His expression was tight, already familiar with the task of smoothing over the chaos his daughter often created. The sound in the grand lobby of Solaria Heights, where only the soft melodies of a piano and the restrained laughter of the elite usually echoed, was now shattered by the shrill, defiant voice of Callista Whitmore. "This is a place for the elite, not some community center," she screamed, her finger pointing straight at Otis's face like an indictment without evidence. The blonde girl, dressed in a pristine white Ralph Lauren gown, marched to the front desk as if leading an army. Without an ounce of shame or hesitation, she continued loudly. "Why are you all still standing here? He doesn't belong here. Get him out. Monica, do you want to be fired?" Monica, the front desk attendant who had been working just over a year, had never faced a situation like this. She knew Otis had all the proper documentation, knew full well the file was marked with platinum priority access. But the identity of Callista, as the only daughter of Richard Whitmore, a principal shareholder in the corporation, hung over her like a blade. Under the curious gaze of dozens in the lobby, Monica stood frozen, clenching her fists, trying to hide the trembling. An Asian guest at the bar looked up with a furrowed brow. A white woman in tennis attire set down her drink and pulled out her phone to record. Within 3 minutes, at least 5 videos had been captured from different angles, showing a white girl shouting into the face of a well-dressed 12-year-old black boy, while staff stood by without intervening. Callista didn't care. She barked toward security. "I'm not joking. Get Derek down here. Immediately. I'm not letting this stain the Whitmore name." Otis didn't move. He didn't retreat, didn't resist, didn't speak. He gently placed his folder on the counter, his hand still gripping the leather case. His voice was low, but each word cut through like a blade slicing velvet. "I'm only doing exactly what my mother told me. Check in. On time. By the rules." A tall security guard appeared. His eyes moved from Otis to Callista, then to Monica. He slowed his steps, waiting for an order. "Escort this boy out before I call my father," Callista commanded. Monica clenched her fists. She wanted to speak, to scream that Otis had done nothing wrong, that the policy was clear. But fear, not of losing her job, but of losing her dignity in front of her superior, choked her words. At that moment, The large glass doors behind them whirred open. A black woman stepped inside. White blazer, 2-inch heels clicking softly on the marble floor. Her coiled hair was pinned neatly. She removed her Versace sunglasses, revealing eyes that were sharp and uncompromising. "Vanessa Carter," she announced, her voice resonant and commanding. "Mother of the boy you just called trash." Callista froze. The security guard subtly pulled his hand away from his radio. Monica exhaled like someone who had just escaped a tidal wave. Vanessa looked Callista up and down, her expression not angry, but cold enough to numb. Then she turned to Otis, gently placing a hand on his shoulder, as if transferring all her calm fire through that single touch. "You did the right thing. I'm proud of you." The entire lobby fell into utter silence. The elevator doors slid open. Richard Whitmore stepped out, a tall figure clad in a charcoal Armani suit, his blue tie pinned with a platinum clip engraved with the initials ROO. This man needed no introduction. His very presence caused Solaria Heights to fall into silence. As the general manager of the most prestigious resort in the Whitmore Luxury Holdings chain, and the powerful father of Callista, Richard's word was the final authority in this place. And in his eyes, the presence of Otis Carter was no more than a grain of sand, adrift in the vast ocean of opulence he controlled. With just a cold glance at Otis, Richard had already made his decision, without asking a single question. "Get out. This is private property," he said, his voice as sharp as steel hitting marble. Without so much as glancing at the reservation confirmation still clutched in Otis's hand, he marched over, gripped the boy's small arm, and began dragging him toward the exit. Otis pulled back slightly, his voice steady but laced with hurt. "My mother made the reservation. It's paid for. We have the confirmation." But the words vanished into the air like a kite with a severed string. No one caught them. No one paused to verify. To Richard, the name Carter carried no weight. That black boy could not possibly belong in a place where even the silverware on the buffet was worth thousands. Vanessa hadn't yet reached them when she saw her son being pulled toward the door, like a criminal. Her heels struck the marble floor hard as she shouted, "Let go of my son!" Richard turned, suspicion in his eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm the one who booked the VIP suite 1001. My name is Vanessa Carter." A moment of silence. Richard narrowed his eyes and gestured to Monica. The receptionist stepped forward, her hands trembling as she held out the reservation screen. "Room number 1001, under the name Vanessa Carter. Prepaid with an American Express black card. Total charges of $3,860 for 2 nights, including the spa and champagne package." Richard's expression faltered, but he still clung to a tone of condescension. "I wasn't aware. There must be some mistake here." There's no mistake. There's someone here who deliberately tried to erase us," Vanessa said, her voice like a saw slowly slicing through the silence of the lobby. "And you just laid hands on a minor without just cause. There are cameras, witnesses, and very clear acts of racial discrimination." By now, guests in the lobby had begun to gather. A group of tourists from New York whispered, "Didn't that girl just call him trash earlier?" The blonde one, Richard's daughter. "This is going online for sure." Otis stood beside his mother, his gaze still lifted. No tears, no trembling, just silence. The silence of someone who had just been erased from a place they were invited to. The silence of a wound to his dignity that he had learned to stitch up since he was very young. Monica bowed her head slightly and whispered to Vanessa, "Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry. I know your documents are all valid, but we're under pressure." Vanessa turned to her son. "You don't need to apologize for being where you belong. The ones who are wrong are the ones who think you don't deserve to be here." Otis nodded faintly, then reached into his bag and pulled out a fountain pen. On the back of the confirmation slip, He wrote a single line. Being rejected doesn't mean you're wrong. It means they're afraid to see that they are. The slanted handwriting, deep blue ink, etched onto white paper, like the silent beginning of an uprising. Richard stood frozen, and Vanessa, the woman he had once mistaken for an outsider, simply gave a cold smile and said, "We'll be staying." But not as guests. The air in the lobby of Solaria Heights had thickened, as if it could be sliced with a knife. Vanessa Carter didn't shout. She didn't need to. Every word she uttered was as sharp as a blade, cold, precise, and undeniable. "Monica," she turned to the receptionist, her gaze not angry, but unwavering with a conviction that defied belief. "I'm asking you to reconfirm the booking information in front of everyone here." Monica, her hands trembling, lips tightly pressed, quickly typed into the system. The large screen behind the desk flickered for a moment before displaying clearly, "Vanessa Carter, Suite 1, 1001. Check-in date, the 12th. Status, confirmed, fully paid. Special note, early check-in. Requested authorized recipient, Otis Carter." A harsh ding echoed as the printer spat out the reservation slip. Monica silently handed the printout to Richard Whitmore, his hand slightly unsteady, though he tried to keep his expression firm as ever. Vanessa took the confirmation, held it up for the now murmuring crowd to see. "This is the proof. My son's name is in the system. It's been prepaid. Early check-in was requested. But you didn't ask his name. You didn't verify his documents. You didn't check the record." Her voice was deliberate, each word a bell toll, forcing everyone to listen. "You looked at his skin. Then you judged. Then you ordered him dragged out like an intruder." The lobby fell into utter silence. A German couple in the middle of check-in froze. A brown-skinned businesswoman gently shook her head while holding her wine glass. A man near the elevator whispered under his breath, "This is absurd. He's just a kid." Callista, now huddled behind the counter, her face flushed with a mix of fury and shame, opened her mouth to interject, but Vanessa locked eyes with her, an unflinching stare that pierced through layers of mascara and false pride. "Your daughter called my son trash at school, and today you treated him like a thief." Richard opened his mouth to defend himself, but no words came. He turned to Monica, searching for some form of support, but Monica only bowed her head and said quietly, yet loud enough for all to hear, "I'm sorry. I was wrong for not doing what was right." Vanessa gave a subtle nod, then stepped toward Otis, gently straightening the collar of his shirt. She bent down and spoke softly, yet clearly, for the entire lobby to hear. "My son is not a thief, not a delivery boy, not a stranger. He's a citizen, a guest, a human being." Otis stood still, his eyes dry. He didn't cry, he didn't scream, but his expression was a blend of pride and a silent, deep crack, the kind only children who grow up in the shadows of discrimination truly understand. A female guest in a white dress placed her hand gently on Otis's shoulder and whispered, "You're very brave." Vanessa turned to the security camera mounted in the ceiling corner. "I demand that this footage be preserved. If anyone wants to deny this happened, I'll send the video to the entire Whitmore Holdings board." A mid-level manager rushed out from the back, nodding urgently. "We will archive everything, and I apologize, on behalf of the entire hotel." Vanessa didn't respond to him. She simply turned to her son, raised her hand, and gently clasped Otis's small fingers. The same hand that had just been yanked away by prejudice, now held firmly by the dignity of a mother who would not yield. In the middle of Solaria Heights' grand lobby, where the usual ambiance consisted of rolling leather suitcases and the faint scent of luxury perfume, for the first time in years, everything fell so silent one could hear a pin drop, Richard Whitmore stood motionless, his face pale, struggling to maintain his posture, though his back bent under the weight of shock. He hadn't been exposed behind closed doors, but by a black woman, publicly in front of customers, staff, and his daughter. Vanessa Carter didn't scream. She didn't slam the counter. Her voice was soft, but it echoed like thunder. Richard Whitmore, you are officially terminated, effective immediately. Several receptionists looked up in alarm. A mid-level manager quickly bowed his head, but no one intervened. No one dared speak in his defense. Richard hesitated. Who do you think you are? You don't have the authority. I run this. Vanessa stepped closer, placing a special executive ID card on the counter. I'm the majority stakeholder in Whitmore Holdings, after acquiring 51% from the board last year. And yes, you signed the revised personnel charter, which clearly states, discriminatory behavior warrants immediate dismissal. He stared at the card, his expression shifting from doubt to psychological collapse, then looked at Vanessa, his eyes transforming from anger to dread. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Vanessa remained unmoved. It's exactly that ignorance that makes you dangerous. Power is not meant to protect prejudice, but to end it. Behind him, Callista stood frozen, her lips pressed tightly together, clutching the strap of her Chanel bag until her knuckles turned white. But upon witnessing her father publicly humiliated, she launched one last feeble, spiteful retort. I just thought, he didn't belong here. That sentence, short, cold, and bare, shot through the air like a bullet. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Vanessa turned to her. With one sentence, you've just confirmed your father's entire value system. Callista opened her mouth, but no words came. The eyes of everyone in the lobby turned to him, shifting from curiosity to contempt. A security guard stepped forward, awaiting instructions. Vanessa didn't need much more than a glance. Please escort Mr. Richard out of the premises, quietly, but with more dignity than he showed my son. Richard's shoulders slumped. He bowed his head and silently followed the guard. The soft thud of his leather shoes on the marble floor echoed like the tolling of a bell, marking the end of an era ruled by arrogance. Otis stood beside his mother, watching, not with smugness, but with a complicated emotion. Sorrow, but also relief, as if something heavy that had lingered for too long had finally been lifted. A guest, a white businessman with salt and pepper hair, approached Vanessa and murmured, I've witnessed many brand crises, but you just turned a case of discrimination into a cultural reset. Vanessa gave a slight smile. It's not a reset. It's just starting from the right place. A little Asian girl who had been playing in the corner of the lobby ran over to Otis and offered him a peppermint candy. You were so brave. Otis smiled, knelt to her level, and replied, Not brave, just not silent anymore. That day, the hotel's internal PA system delivered a brief announcement. We are committed to building a space free of prejudice and bias. Solaria Heights will change, starting today. Just 7 days after the incident at Solaria Heights, consequences once thought untouchable began crashing down like a summer storm, unloading every bit of tension it had stored. Richard Whitmore, once the near untouchable figure who ran the luxury hotel chain with absolute authority, was officially removed from the board of directors of Whitmore Luxury Holdings. An internal email was sent to all 2,000 employees titled, Termination of Richard Whitmore for gross violation of diversity and inclusion policy. The message didn't mince words. It was brief, ice cold. No severance package, no farewell gathering, no mention of contributions or legacy. Within 72 hours of his dismissal, his access card was deactivated. His private office on the 41st floor of the New York headquarters was permanently sealed. A senior HR executive revealed all of Mr. Whitmore's entitlements, including escrowed shares, special voting privileges, and first-class travel benefits, have been revoked. The man who once dined with senators and bank CEOs no longer had the right to step into any hotel bearing the Whitmore name. But Richard wasn't the only one free-falling from the heights of privilege. Callista Whitmore, once a weekly feature in Wellington Crest's Outstanding Students Bulletin, was also suspended indefinitely. The academic report stated clearly, harm caused to the student community through racially discriminatory conduct, incompatible with the institution's values. Her student ID was confiscated. She was required to complete a social equity training course before even being considered for re-entry. But the bad news didn't end there. The media exploded. The New York Times ran a bold headline, "From privilege to collapse, the Whitmore family and the less elite schools never teach." On social media, the hashtag number "privilege is not immunity" began trending. A 43-second clip of Callista yelling into Otis's face went viral with over 7.3 million views in just 2 days. People didn't share it to laugh, but to ask, how many kids like Otis have been silenced by other Callistas? The Whitmore family later vacated their $7 million penthouse at Central Park South. Neighbors who once politely nodded in the elevator now looked away. Rumors swirled that several business partners had paused their contracts with Whitmore Holdings, waiting for the scandal to die down, if it ever would. And Callista, who once had a personal stylist every weekend, now wore a faded sweater, handwriting applications for a public high school in the state of New York, where there was no private shuttle, no classrooms with leather chairs, and, most importantly, no one who cared about the Whitmore name. She sat at the back of the class. No more laughter, no more noble entourage. In the eyes of her new classmates, there was no power, only a teenager who needed to relearn what it meant to be a person. Elsewhere in the city, Vanessa Carter carefully folded a handwritten apology letter from the principal of Wellington Crest, addressed to Otis. The letter wasn't empty. It wasn't cold. It carried a rare sense of understanding. Otis deserves an academic environment rooted in fairness, where talent is seen first, not skin color. Vanessa didn't respond publicly, but she preserved the letter, laminated it, and placed it beside a photo of Otis wearing his preschool graduation cap, as a quiet reminder. Change never comes from apologies. It comes from justice carried out. Otis didn't return to Wellington Crest in a blaze of glory or under a spotlight. He returned with calm resolve, the same quiet steps, the same worn backpack slung over one shoulder, and the same leather-bound notebook tucked neatly into his coat sleeve. For weeks following the seismic incident, he showed no anger, offered no grand retellings, and wrote none of the emotional speeches people expected from a victim-turned-symbol. The 12-year-old boy simply chose to move forward in silence. When classmates whispered, "Otis, is it true you're the reason the Whitmores lost everything?" he just gave a gentle smile. "I was just there to check in, like anyone else." When a teacher asked him to write an essay about his experience with discrimination, Otis chose to write about patience. He made no mention of Callista or the hotel, just a brief piece filled with metaphors about a droplet of water slowly wearing away stone. No hammer, no sword required. Each morning before school, Vanessa Carter looked at her son as though still stunned by him. One day, she asked softly, "Are you glad that happened?" Otis looked up, eyes bright and steady. "No, ma'am. I didn't want them to fall. I just wanted to be seen for who I am." And in that moment, Vanessa understood. The boy she once feared would be broken by this world was the one helping mend it. At the end of the school year, the name Otis Carter was called during the Wellington Crest ceremony, honoring outstanding students. But the moment's significance wasn't the certificate. It was the invitation that followed, from the National Young Leaders Program, a nationwide initiative selecting just 48 middle school students from over 20,000 applicants to attend an 8-week summer camp in Washington, D.C. Otis was the first black student from the school ever invited. On the day of departure, Vanessa carefully packed her son's belongings. In the suitcase, she placed a small book, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. The cover was faded. It had once belonged to Otis's grandfather, a postal worker for 40 years, who had always dreamed that one day his family would step into the places they were once only allowed to look at through glass. When Otis boarded the bus that would take the student delegation to the airport, something remarkable happened. Every gaze, from classmates, the driver, the teachers, followed him. No one mispronounced his name. No one asked what neighborhood he came from, what his mother did for work, or why he was there. They all saw one thing. The boy belonged. Otis's silence after everything wasn't retreat. It was a quiet declaration that true victory doesn't come from making others fall, but from standing tall without ever bowing your head. Not long after, a photo began circulating across social media. In the image, Otis stood beside the executive director of the National Young Leaders Program, holding the speech he'd just delivered. His eyes didn't beam with glee, nor did they carry bitterness. Only the composed calm of someone who understood his worth. The caption read simply, "Otis Carter didn't demand justice with a scream. He earned it with intellect and resolve." And from that point on, in every room Otis entered, whether boardroom, conference, or classroom, no one ever dared to ask him, "Are you sure you belong here?" Because by then, everyone already knew the answer. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please like the video and subscribe so you won't miss the next one.